300 years after the Noldor arrived in Beleriand and the dawning of the sun upon Arda, Finrod Felagund, the Lord of Nargothrond, went hunting east of Sirion with Maglor and Maedhros, the sons of Feanor. Growing weary of the chase, he journeyed alone towards the mountains of Ered Linden, shining afar. And taking the dwarf road, he traversed the lands crossing the river Galion at Sarn Athrad, and turned southward along the streams of Askar, reaching the northern Osiriand. In a quiet valley beneath the glistening springs of Thalos, Felagund encountered an unexpected sight. Evening lights flickered in the distance, accompanied by the strains of singing that echoed through the night. This was a land where the green elves, guardians of the woods, held sway, known for their reverence for nature and the harmony of their songs. Yet these melodies were not of elven origin. Approaching cautiously, Felagund discovered a band of travellers, the followers of Bëor the Old, the first among men to set foot inside Beleriand. They sang with joy, believing they had found sanctuary from the perils of their past. Bëor, their leader, was a chieftain among men, guiding his people on a perilous journey from the distant lands of the east, fleeing the shadows of Morgoth. Long did Felagund observe these newcomers, and as they slept, he approached their camp, and with the strings of Bëor's harp, wove a melody unlike any heard by the ears of men.
In the midst of his song, the minds of Bëor's folk were transported far beyond the realms of mortal understanding. Visions of the world's creation unfolded before their eyes, revealing the handwork of the Valar and shaping the earth. They beheld the light of the two trees, the birth of the stars, and the dawn of the age of men. And amidst the symphony of creation, they glimpsed their own place in its history, bound by destiny to the fate of Middle-earth.
When they emerged from their trance, the memory of Felagund's song clung to their minds like a dream, demonstrating music's profound ability to surpass mortal boundaries. They named him Nom, meaning wisdom, and his people Nomin, the wise. Though they initially mistook him for a Valar, their belief in his divine nature inspired their journey westward. Finrod remained among them, sharing his knowledge and forging bonds of friendship. Through his guidance, Bëor's people found solace and strength in their newfound homeland, embracing the light that shone forth from the west. As time passed, other men ventured into Beleriand, each carving out their own destinies amidst the tumult of the First Age. Finrod soon noticed that he could understand the thoughts of men when they wished to reveal them, making their speech easy to interpret. He also learned that men knew little about their origins, unlike the elves, who, being immortal, maintained a direct link to their history. In contrast, men had a fragmented understanding, influenced by their mortality. From their songs and speech, from fragments of stories they barely understood themselves, Finrod discerned that Morgoth's shadow had fallen upon them from the very beginning. Slowly, dark history of their awakening began to reveal itself.
Thus it was that men from the first fell under the shadow of Morgoth, and as the years passed, their numbers grew. However, those who saw through the darkness and terror of the fallen Valar began migrating after coming into conflict with other men who fell under the shadow. They were drawn to the west, seeking the rumoured Great Sea and the light found there. These men were divided into 3 distinct peoples with their own language and appearance. As they continued moving westward, the tribes eventually separated into 2 hosts, with 2 tribes moving north and the other south. The northern host was further divided, with the lesser folk settling at the shores of the Sea of Rhûn and dwelling at the feet of the nearby hills in the southwest. The other folk of the northern host, much greater in number, later settled in the northeastern woods near the shores. And when the greater folk were able to craft boats to sail the sea, they eventually discovered the lesser folk dwelling in the hills. However, they did not meet or exchange tidings often, as their tongues had already diverged from their original common speech. Some of the greater folk stayed behind in Rhovanion for many ages, and they were the ancestors of the Northmen, of whom the Rohirrim and the Men of Dale are most known in the later ages of the Sun. During their wanderings, the lesser folk made contact with the dark elves that still dwelt in the east and adopted many words and devices that influenced their language. They also encountered dwarves whenever they travelled near mountains. The tribe that followed the southern route was different from the 2 folk of the north and spoke an unrelated language. They settled in the valleys of the White Mountains and were joined by a group of strange folk whom the Sindar bestowed name Drúedain. As these scattered peoples ventured further into the west, crossing the vast forests of Eriador, many faded from memory, leaving behind only traces of their passing. Among these were the Gwathwyrim, who would later become the Dunlendings. In the shifting power among men, the leadership of the lesser folk fell to Bëor, whose people had grown weary from their long journeys. Unlike other tribes, they possessed no beasts of burden, and their arduous travels were made heavier by the need to carry their belongings on their backs. The southern tribes, known as the Haleth, journeyed north under the guidance of the Drúedain. Passing through the gap between the Misty and White Mountains, many of them settled in the forests of wilderness, becoming herders and woodfolk between the rivers Greyflood and Eisen. The Haleth were fewer in number, but their isolation allowed them to cultivate a fierce independence, one that would serve them well in the lands to come. In the north, the greater folk, led by their chieftain Marach, grew ever stronger in both number and might. They pressed westward with greater purpose. His people, divided into 3 hosts of about 2,000 men each, were numerous and well prepared for their journey. They crossed the wide expanse of Eriador, moving as a united force with their horses, cattle and flocks of sheep and goats in tow. They reached the foothills of the Ered Luin a full year ahead of the other tribes. Instead of braving the mountains, their scouts sought an alternative route around the southern slopes and after much effort found a passage. In Assyriand, the green elves grew troubled by the presence of men, dismayed by the trees they felled and the beasts they hunted. Seeking to preserve their lands, they turned to Felagund for aid. Following his counsel, Bëor led his people eastward to lands under the care of Amrod and Amrus. There they settled, and the place became known as Estolad, the Encampment.
Thus the men entered Beleriand, and from that time onward, they were known as the Edain. Although Edain, in the tongue of the Sindar, referred to all men, it became a name of honor, reserved for the noble 3 houses that came in the long peace forging lasting bonds with the elves in the wars against Morgoth. Some also called them Atanatari, or the Fathers of Men, a title used to describe the forefathers of Edain. The three houses, those of Bëor, the Haladin, or House of Haleth, and the folk of Marach, later known as the House of Hador, whose deeds shaped the fates of Middle-earth in the years to come.